because I took a break once we had the kids and everything. I took a break from school, and I've just been working. And then 2 years ago, when COVID hit, the pandemic and everything, I lost my job. And then I restarted my education. And I'm actually graduating at the end of the month. But
Then what are you going to do?
what am I going to do?
Yeah, do you have like a place in mind where you want to work? Or?
Well, I had something lined up. But with everything that's going on now and like the breakup and everything, we kind of put that on hold. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
Yeah, those are a lot of decisions to make.
So then, and then Maddi works at home.
She's hybrid.
Hybrid? Okay,
Yeah,
so
she's
she
hybrid.
kind of
So,
does both.
Yep. And she, that's a big kind of thing of like why she was looking for a different job was because she wouldn't know if she would have to go up to Rochester until like the evening of the day before. And it's just hard to plan. It's just hard to plan to get.
It's Easter Sunday and my sister is still missing. Everyone's frustrated and we just can't figure out where she is.
On the morning of March 31st, 2023, life in the small town of Winona, Minnesota, started like any other. Birds chirping, cars moving quietly along neighborhood streets, parents hurrying their kids to daycare. But for one young woman, that seemingly ordinary morning became the last time anyone ever saw her. Her name was Maddi Kingsbury, 26 years old. A devoted mother of two, balancing the chaos of raising toddlers while rebuilding her life after ending her relationship with Adam, the father of her children. Although they were no longer romantically involved, the two continued living under the same roof for the sake of their kids. That morning, Maddi and Adam dropped their children off at daycare together, as they had done many times before. Everything seemed routine. But after returning home, Maddi vanished without a trace. She never showed up for work. She didn't message her sister like she always did. And perhaps most chilling of all, her car was still at the house, along with her cell phone, wallet, jacket, and laptop. For someone who had plans to travel over the weekend to visit family, her sudden disappearance was not voluntary. This wasn't a case of someone walking away from life. It was something darker, something involuntary, something potentially criminal. Worried family members contacted the police. A missing persons report was filed. The search began immediately. Forests, riversides, and rural areas surrounding Winona were combed through. Over 500 volunteers mobilized to aid in the effort, many of them strangers touched by Maddi's story. On TikTok, Maddi's sister Megan posted emotional pleas for help, but as hours turned into days, there were no significant leads. Meanwhile, police began to focus on the one person who last saw Maddi alive: Adam. At first, Adam's story seemed plausible. He claimed Maddi was still home when he left that morning and suggested she may have gotten a ride with someone else. But the deeper detectives dug, the more things didn't add up. Timeline inconsistencies, vague explanations, and growing concerns from Maddi's family began to paint a troubling picture. It became increasingly clear Maddi wouldn't just walk away from her kids. Something had gone terribly wrong, and all eyes were now on Adam.
Yeah, so this morning when I last heard from her, so that's why personally I wasn't very concerned yet.
What time about was that?
Probably around 10.
10 a.m.?
I left the house around 10 to bring some stuff down to my parents. And then when I came back home, I noticed that my car was still there. She was going to take my car to work today, and my car was still there. And she wasn't there. That's the last I saw from her. And then I tried texting her, tried calling her, and I haven't heard anything since.
In the days following Maddi Kingsbury's disappearance, the town of Winona was gripped by anxiety and confusion. Flyers flooded social media. Neighborhoods organized search parties. The local media followed the story around the clock, recognizing it as one of the most alarming cases the region had seen in years. Police quickly searched the home Maddi shared with Adam. Inside, they found her phone, wallet, coat, and laptop, untouched. There was no sign of a struggle, but the lack of chaos only deepened the mystery. If Maddi had left of her own will, why would she leave behind everything? Her loved ones were adamant. Maddi adored her children. She would never abandon them. She had no known mental health issues, no history of disappearing. She was responsible, careful, and deeply connected to her family. Nothing about her vanishing made sense. Meanwhile, Adam, her former partner and the last person to see her, was becoming a person of interest. At first, he cooperated. He sat down with investigators and recounted the morning of her disappearance. She said she had a meeting at 8:15 and would head out afterward. I left the house around 10:30 to drop some things off at my parents'. When I came back, my car was still there. Maddi was gone. But the more Adam talked, the more things began to unravel. His timeline didn't match GPS data or surveillance footage. His story changed under pressure. He hesitated. He gave non-committal answers like, "I think so," or "maybe." He couldn't remember details. Detectives pushed harder. Adam shifted blame, mentioning recent arguments and claiming Maddi was seeing someone new. He said they were living under the same roof but essentially separated. But none of that explained why Maddi disappeared. The public began asking hard questions. Why was Adam's account so vague? Why were key timestamps not lining up? Could Maddi have been harmed inside the very house she lived in? As investigators probed deeper, Adam's demeanor became defensive. He denied wrongdoing but offered little in the way of clarity. Meanwhile, the search for Maddi intensified. Police expanded their efforts to rivers, storage units, and wooded areas. They used drones, canine units, thermal imaging, anything that might lead to a trace of Maddi. But the silence was deafening. Each passing hour made the situation more dire. Detectives knew that time was their enemy. Statistically, the longer a missing person case drags on, the lower the odds of a safe return. The community's hope began shifting into heartbreak, and through it all, Adam remained the center of attention. A man with opportunity, motive, and a crumbling alibi.
And this morning we both did the drop-off, and I couldn't get any response from her since before 10 or whatever. And I tried calling her. We usually pick up the kids around 4:15, and I tried calling her a bunch of times. I think 3:30 and like 3:45 and 4, and I didn't get any response. So I just picked up the kids myself.
You know anybody in town she might be with? Any clubs or organizations she's affiliated with?
Not clubs or anything.
Does she do it like a weekly thing, like a girls' night out or anything like that, usually?
No, nothing like that.
Anywhere else in town you think she might be?
At this time of night, no. During the day, she constantly goes to like coffee shops like Blue Grounds and Blue Heron and stuff like that. But not at this time of night. It's definitely odd for her right now.
Does she ever go to the bars at all?
No, we're not drinkers at all.
And she was supposed to leave for the cities tomorrow. That's correct?
Yep. So last weekend we made plans for this weekend. I was gonna bring our son Noah down here to my parents, and she was gonna bring Ellie up to the cities to her sisters. And when I haven't got a response from her all day, I just took both the kids down here to my parents.
All right. Well, I'll do with that information what I can. Do you think she would want it?
Nobody else has, I don't know if you can tell me or not, but like nobody else heard from her at all?
No.
Wow, okay. Alright.
And that's pretty...
I just texted her sister. Her sister texted me back. Or she texted me about an hour ago. And I got back to her a little bit ago too.
What's her sister's name?
Her sister's name is Megan, Megan.
Do you have a good phone number I could reach her at?
I could send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be super appreciated.
Sure, yeah. Do you want me to do it right now while we're on the phone?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
If you're able to. Alright, I'll do with that information what I can, okay? I appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, can I expect any sort of, like, response, like tomorrow or something? Or, I don't know if I should be worried or what.
Sure, yeah, we'll try to update everyone as soon as we can.
Okay, so I'll get like a phone call from you guys?
Sure, yep.
Okay, sounds good.
Alright, thank you.
Adam said the last time he heard from Maddi was on Easter Sunday, just a few days before she vanished. During his initial police interview, he insisted that everything between them seemed normal at the time. No fights, no visible tension. But the way he described normal sounded rehearsed, like he was trying to convince himself more than the detectives. According to Adam, Maddi had spent Easter Sunday doing what she always did, taking care of the kids, preparing candy, dyeing eggs, and smiling like any other mother. But the very next day, she started to go quiet. Adam said she barely texted him that week, sending only short replies to her family. One critical detail: the last known message Maddi sent was at 8:15 a.m. on March 31st to her sister, and that was also the last time her phone ever pinged a signal. After that, it was like she'd been erased from the world. When asked if he was worried by her silence, Adam told police he wasn't really concerned at first, assuming she was busy or out somewhere. But contradictions began to appear. If he wasn't worried, why did he send her multiple texts that day? Why did he try calling around 3:30 p.m. and again at 4 p.m.? And if he truly believed she was just busy, why did he pick up the kids himself instead of waiting? It felt as though Adam subconsciously knew something was terribly wrong. Yet what truly alarmed detectives wasn't his worry, it was how detached and inconsistent his story was. The Friday morning Maddi disappeared started with something completely routine. Maddi and Adam dropping off their kids at daycare together. Despite no longer being romantically involved, they had settled into a shared parenting rhythm. Adam recalled that they left home around 7:30 a.m. and returned just before 8. Maddi mentioned having a virtual meeting at 8:15, followed by appointments in Rochester. Adam claimed he planned to clean out the garage and bring some things to his parents' house. Police began mapping out the timeline. 8, Maddi was home, preparing for her meeting. 10:30, Adam said he left, and Maddi was still upstairs. When he returned, Maddi was gone, but her car was still parked outside. At first glance, it seemed plausible. But when detectives asked Adam basic follow-up questions, the gaps became glaring. He couldn't remember what Maddi was wearing. He wasn't sure if she had taken her laptop or bag. At first, he guessed, probably, but later contradicted himself. Actually, maybe she left them. That guesswork collapsed quickly, because Maddi's phone, wallet, laptop, and jacket were all found inside the house. That meant if she had left, she did so empty-handed. Not exactly normal for a young mother preparing for a workday. Adam tried to explain, saying maybe someone picked her up. When asked who, he couldn't name anyone. Maddi's family firmly denied she had any plans or appointments that morning. There were no texts, no emails, nothing. Police started to suspect Maddi may have never left the house at all, despite what Adam claimed. Surveillance footage from the area, phone data, and witness statements showed no signs of Maddi ever leaving. It was beginning to look like Adam was the only person who could account for what happened to her. Adam told detectives he left the house around 10:30 a.m. and that Maddi was still upstairs when he walked out. But that specific time, 10:30, would soon become the center of intense scrutiny, because it was also the last time Maddi was believed to be alive. According to Adam, he didn't say goodbye to her directly. Instead, he sent her a quick text saying he was heading out. He claimed he drove to get gas, visited his parents, and returned home around noon. But GPS data from his vehicle revealed he didn't leave the Winona area until around 11:50 a.m. That left an unaccounted-for window of over an hour, from 10:30 to 11:50, where no evidence could place him outside the home. When pressed, Adam gave a range of vague reasons. He said he was cleaning the garage, or maybe grabbing forgotten items, or just got delayed. Every time detectives re-asked the question, the details shifted. He once said he left at 10:15, then 10:45, then maybe 11. The police kept pushing. What exactly did he bring in his car? Adam mentioned old boxes and holiday decorations, saying he planned to take them to his parents' house. But no one at his parents' place confirmed seeing him. Then came a disturbing admission. Adam had burned items in the backyard fire pit. He admitted to burning some cardboard, old junk, and a dirty sweatshirt. But when asked whose sweatshirt it was and why he burned it, he dodged the question, saying, "Just cleaning up." All these details added up to one unsettling possibility. Maddi may never have left the house that morning, and Adam was the only person who knew why. When detectives compared Adam's statements to technical data, the timeline quickly fell apart. A text Adam sent to Maddi at 10:29 a.m. said, "Car and gas are ready," suggesting he had already left. But he claimed he didn't leave until 10:30. Even more damaging, surveillance footage recorded his car leaving the neighborhood around 11:50 a.m., nearly 90 minutes later than what he told police. So where was he during that time? What was he doing? When asked, Adam said he was resting, eating breakfast, maybe on the laptop. But no one could verify that, and Maddi's devices had gone completely silent since 8:15 a.m. Adam insisted again and again that nothing was wrong, but everything pointed in the opposite direction. His lack of emotion, shifting stories, vague answers. He was quickly becoming the only suspect, at least in the eyes of the law.
Like that, because I wasn't like that very much.
She would go there a couple times a week, right?
Yep. Usually, I would say 2 times a week on average. Usually no more than that.
Any specific days, or like that you said it could vary?
Well, it would vary. But about 2 weeks ago, about a month ago, she told me that they switched it so that now every Monday and every Friday, they would usually have to go up there. So for the past couple of weeks, that's what it's been. Every Monday and Friday, she'd go up there.
Okay, sure. Mondays and Fridays, you said?
Mondays and Fridays.
So then does she spend the entire day there, or is she...
Not always. Usually she would always come to pick up. Well, I shouldn't say always, but she would usually come to drop off. And then either she would leave shortly after that, or she would have a quick meeting, because they usually have like a huddle meeting at like 8:15 or something with her team.
Yeah.
So they would have like a quick meeting, and then she would usually take off after that.
Okay.
So that's why like this Friday morning it was very, it was just a normal morning from my perspective until that evening.
That's strange.
The first interrogation with Adam didn't begin with confrontation. Instead, detectives chose a structured, chronological approach, a proven technique to expose inconsistencies in a suspect's story without triggering immediate defensiveness. Their primary goal was to reconstruct the morning of March 31st, from the moment Adam and Maddi dropped off their children at daycare to when Adam claimed he left the house alone. It was a narrow window, but it was the last confirmed period when Maddi was believed to be alive. Any inaccuracies within this timeline could point investigators directly toward what really happened. On the surface, Adam's version of events seemed neat. They left home around 7:30 a.m., returned by 8. Maddi had a video meeting at 8:15, and he left at 10:30. When he came back, she was gone. But the deeper detectives pressed into those details, the more his narrative began to unravel. One of the first red flags was the supposed 8:15 a.m. online meeting. That timestamp wasn't arbitrary. It was the moment Maddi's phone activity abruptly ceased. She sent a brief message to her sister, then nothing. No emails, no calls, no texts. Her phone went silent and stayed that way. For someone with a consistent work schedule and digital presence, this wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. When asked whether he saw Maddi attending her meeting, Adam gave vague, non-committal responses. He wasn't sure. He didn't know if she used headphones. He didn't recall whether her laptop was open. The issue wasn't that he didn't remember. It was that he avoided clarity at every turn. And for someone who lived in the same house just steps away from her, the lack of awareness rang hollow. Detectives quickly picked up on the pattern. Adam was intentionally avoiding questions tied to Maddi's final confirmed moments. He couldn't say for certain that he saw her after 8:15. He couldn't confirm whether she ever went upstairs or participated in her work call. Every answer was couched in doubt. Maybe, I think, not sure. That vagueness became even more suspicious when compared with what should have been routine knowledge. Adam didn't remember what Maddi was wearing that morning. He didn't know if she had her phone, bag, or coat. He hadn't heard any conversation that would suggest a Zoom call was happening. These weren't minor memory lapses. Investigators saw them as potential indicators of something more serious, a conscious effort to obscure a timeline. Adding to the concern was the silence from Maddi's phone. After 8:15 a.m., there was no communication from her whatsoever. This sudden drop-off was inconsistent with her habits. Maddi was known for being in constant contact with her sister, friends, and coworkers. Her phone was not damaged, it had battery life. The only thing missing was Maddi herself. Then came a strange message from Adam at 10:29 a.m. "I'm heading out. Let me know if you need anything." On the surface, it was mundane, but context changed everything. Maddi had not responded to anything for over 2 hours, and Adam didn't seem the least bit alarmed. According to criminal behavior analysts, this could indicate a staged communication, designed to present an illusion of normalcy or to support an alibi later. It's a tactic investigators have seen before. Suspects sending texts to victims they already know can't respond to create a digital trail of concern or plausible deniability. What detectives found even more telling was Adam's complete lack of follow-up. He didn't try calling. He didn't send another message. There was no emotional urgency, no signs of distress or even curiosity about why Maddi hadn't answered. This flat response, combined with vague recall and a strangely curated timeline, began to form a troubling picture. Adam was either willfully blind to Maddi's disappearance or directly involved in it. He also claimed to have left the house at 10:30 a.m., yet surveillance footage and vehicle data showed his car remained parked until nearly 11:50 a.m. When asked about that, his story shifted. He said he might have stayed longer or lost track of time. But his inability to clearly account for this missing 90-minute window, the exact time frame in which Maddi disappeared, was impossible to ignore. The more Adam was questioned, the more apparent it became. He couldn't or wouldn't provide a consistent narrative for the most crucial period of the investigation, and that in itself became a form of evidence. There was no confession during that session, no direct admission of wrongdoing. But what police did obtain was far more useful. A map of contradictions, behavioral evasions, and time gaps, all pointing toward Adam as the last person to see Maddi alive, and the only one unable or unwilling to explain what happened next. 3 days after Maddi's disappearance, the first formal interrogation marked a turning point in the investigation. Adam, the last person known to have seen Maddi, was no longer viewed as a cooperative witness. Instead, he was now emerging as a key person of interest, if not a potential suspect. The interrogation focused heavily on a specific window of time, from 8:15 a.m. to around 11:50 a.m., the moment Maddi sent her final message to her sister, until Adam's vehicle was first captured, leaving the area by neighborhood security cameras. This gap of more than 3 hours was crucial. Maddi seemingly vanished during this time, and Adam's explanations of his whereabouts began to crumble under scrutiny. When asked why he left the house that morning, Adam failed to give a consistent or plausible answer. At first, he said he went to get gas and drop items off at his parents' house. Then he changed his story, claiming he had been organizing the garage. Later, he suggested he simply needed some air. None of these excuses were backed by witnesses, camera footage, or GPS data. It all relied on his word, a word increasingly called into question. One specific detail stood out, a text message Adam sent to Maddi at 10:29 a.m., stating, "I'm heading out. Let me know if you need anything." On its face, it seemed like a casual, everyday message. But in context, with Maddi having been completely unresponsive since 8:15, the message felt more like an intentional attempt to fabricate normalcy, perhaps even to create a digital alibi. Investigators also noted that Adam never followed up. After sending that one message, he didn't try to call her, didn't send a second text, and expressed no urgency or concern when she didn't respond. This stood out starkly, especially for someone who shared a home with Maddi and co-parented their children. His lack of reaction to her extended silence was deeply abnormal, and investigators began to see it as a potential sign of emotional detachment or premeditated distancing. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a key contradiction. Security footage from neighbors showed that Adam's vehicle remained parked outside the home until approximately 11:50 a.m., not 10:30, as he originally claimed. This created a 90-minute gap in his timeline, a critical chunk of time in which Maddi's fate may have been sealed. And more importantly, it meant that Adam had lied, intentionally or not, about when he left the house. When confronted with this, Adam's explanations became even more vague. He claimed to have spent time cleaning, then said he sat in his car checking his phone. At no point did he express any credible reason for the delay. Worse, each time he was asked to recall specific details, his story shifted slightly, exposing cracks in his narrative. To the investigators, this shifting behavior revealed a familiar pattern: lack of detail, lack of emotion, and avoidance of critical points. It wasn't just what Adam said, it was how he said it. Flat, robotic, disconnected. He appeared more focused on maintaining control of the story than actually remembering what had happened. At the same time, detectives examined digital footprints, phone data, security footage, GPS pings, and none of them supported Adam's timeline. He was, for all practical purposes, unaccounted for during the most critical window of Maddi's disappearance. This first interrogation didn't yield a confession, but it did give investigators something just as valuable: a confirmed timeline of discrepancies, behavioral inconsistencies, and a mounting psychological pressure point. They now knew where to focus when something likely happened and who was the last person present. For detectives, the game had changed. Adam wasn't just someone with a weak alibi, he was someone caught in the act of manipulating a story, and that story was no longer holding together. The walls were starting to close in. And for someone like Adam, who had clearly built his defense on the illusion of routine, that kind of pressure could soon lead to a collapse. As investigators dug deeper into Maddi's personal life, another crucial piece of the puzzle came into view: the fragile emotional state between Maddi and Adam, and more specifically, the quiet emergence of a new man in Maddi's life, Spencer. Spencer wasn't a stranger. He was a co-worker in the healthcare field, someone Maddi had mentioned to friends and her sister. Their relationship was still new, discreet, and cautiously developing. For Maddi, Spencer represented something hopeful, a step forward after years of strain, control, and emotional fatigue. But for Adam, it meant something entirely different. Through interviews with Maddi's family, private messages, and data retrieved from her phone, investigators pieced together a pattern of subtle but persistent possessiveness. Maddi had confided in loved ones that Adam grew irritable when he saw her texting late at night, especially if he suspected the messages were to another man. She said he questioned her about her phone activity, raised his voice when she laughed at a message, and even tried to limit when and where she could communicate. To outsiders, these behaviors might have appeared minor, but for Maddi they were red flags, signs of control. In texts to her best friend, she described feeling suffocated, watched, and unable to be herself at home. She worried that if Adam found out about Spencer, he would become aggressive or attempt to interfere with her plans to move out. That fear wasn't unfounded. Investigators began to see Adam's behavior not just as jealous, but as a reaction to losing control. Maddi had started taking concrete steps to separate her life from his. She was considering moving out, building a new relationship, and reclaiming her independence. From Adam's perspective, this meant losing his influence, his role as co-parent under the same roof, and perhaps even his ability to shape what happened next with the children. And it was happening fast. Maddi had reportedly planned to move out within weeks, something Adam likely knew. That meant the countdown had begun. In just a short time, she would be gone, and Spencer, the new presence, could take a more permanent role in her life and her children's. Maddi had reportedly planned to move out within weeks, something Adam likely knew. That meant the countdown had begun. In just a short time, she would be gone, and Spencer, the new presence, could take a more permanent role in her life and her children's. Investigators didn't need a confession to recognize what was happening. They saw it in Adam's body language, his avoidance when questioned about Spencer, and his failure to acknowledge the emotional reality of the breakup. Instead of accepting Maddi's independence, Adam seemed emotions C299 stuck, caught in the illusion that he still had a say over her life, even as it slipped out of his grasp. From a behavioral analysis perspective, the team noted that Adam showed classic signs of role displacement anxiety, a psychological state often found in men who can't accept the loss of control in a relationship. These individuals may not act out immediately, but under the right pressure, jealousy, fear of abandonment, or a perceived threat, They can become unpredictable and dangerous. In Maddi's case, all three elements were present: a new romantic interest she cared about, a clear desire to move on and build a new life, and a shared living environment where Adam had full access and unchallenged proximity. She was making emotional and logistical progress, but she was doing so inside the most dangerous place she could be, the home she still shared with Adam. To law enforcement, this new information didn't just add depth to the investigation. It defined motive. Jealousy is a well-documented precursor to violence in missing persons and domestic-related cases. In this scenario, the pieces fit: a possessive ex-partner, a new love interest, a looming move, and rising emotional volatility. Crucially, Adam never denied feeling uneasy about Maddi's new relationship. He avoided the topic, brushed off questions, or gave surface-level responses. But detectives knew, in cases like this, what's not said is often more revealing than what is. Maddi didn't just disappear. The investigation now had strong indicators that she was taken out of her life at a moment when she was trying to reclaim it. And that act may have been fueled by one of the most dangerous emotional triggers of all: jealousy, combined with loss of control. As investigators continued to dismantle Adam's story piece by piece, a disturbing discovery from the digital forensics team brought the case into sharper focus. While analyzing Adam's browsing history and social media activity, they uncovered a string of engagements with content related to the Gabby Petito case, a highly publicized 2021 homicide involving a young woman killed by her boyfriend during a cross-country trip. The issue wasn't that Adam had followed the case. Millions of Americans had. What alarmed investigators was how Adam had engaged with it. On platforms like Reddit, Facebook, and anonymous discussion boards, Adam had left comments that raised serious concerns about his perspective. Rather than sympathize with Gabby, the victim, Adam repeatedly questioned her role in the conflict. He suggested that people were too quick to blame the boyfriend, and implied that no one really knows what goes on behind closed doors. Some of his posts even hinted at justifying violent reactions, with statements like, "Some men are pushed too far and can't control themselves." Viewed in isolation, such remarks might be dismissed as careless or edgy. But in the context of a man currently under scrutiny for the disappearance of his former partner, those words took on a much more chilling tone. Investigators began to consider whether Adam wasn't just a passive observer of the Petito case, but rather someone who had internalized and potentially identified with the perpetrator's mindset. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a psychological red flag. What made the discovery even more troubling was the fact that Adam had not deleted any of the posts or search history. The comments were still active, the search terms intact. That indicated that this wasn't a fleeting interest, it was a pattern. A recurring engagement with content centered on violence toward women, victim blaming, and emotional justification for male aggression. Criminal psychologists were brought in to review the data. Their assessment identified signs of cognitive justification syndrome, a behavioral phenomenon in which individuals rationalize or defend violent actions, often drawing from past cases to support their internal narratives. In Adam's case, the concern wasn't that he agreed with a murderer. It was that he seemed to relate to the dynamics that led to violence. More alarmingly, Adam did not display classic markers of impulsivity or panic. Instead, his demeanor during interviews, calm, detached, and oddly composed, suggested a high level of emotional control, often found in individuals who have premeditated their actions and emotionally disconnected from their consequences. At the same time, investigators noticed a disturbing parallel. Maddi, like Gabby, had been preparing to leave a controlling relationship, had recently begun seeing someone new, and had vanished during the fragile transitional phase of regaining her independence. Both women lived with their partners in the weeks prior to their disappearances. Both had expressed concerns about safety and control, and in both cases, the male partner quickly became the center of the investigation. Even Adam's responses mirrored those seen in the Petito case: limited cooperation, avoidance of public statements, and timeline inconsistencies that couldn't be reconciled with available data. The investigative team wasn't drawing a direct equivalence between Adam and Brian Laundrie, the man responsible for Gabby's death, But they couldn't ignore the psychological mirroring and circumstantial similarities. These weren't casual overlaps. They were warning signs, signaling a potential for escalation and a mindset that had possibly been shaped by past cases. The digital forensics team continued scouring Adam's devices for searches involving how to dispose of a body, cleaning up evidence, or how to erase phone data. But even without that, the existing findings painted a dangerous portrait. His repeated exposure to violent narratives, combined with Maddi's efforts to break free from his control, formed a compelling narrative for investigators. They concluded that this was no longer a standard missing persons case. It bore the hallmarks of a high-risk domestic violence scenario, potentially involving premeditation, emotional detachment, and a psychological model of justification rooted in real-world tragedies like Gabby Petito's. What makes someone dangerous isn't always how they act in public. It's how they think in private, what content they consume, what stories they relate to, what ideas they normalize over time. And in Adam's case, those patterns weren't just present. They were disturbingly consistent. The alarm bells were no longer hypothetical. Investigators now had motive, behavior, psychological alignment, and disturbing digital footprints. All that remained was to prove what they already feared, that Maddi's story was headed toward a tragic outcome written long before she ever vanished. While GPS data from Adam's vehicle had already outlined a suspicious route, investigators knew they needed a second, independent source to confirm the accuracy of his movements. Their attention turned to surveillance footage from traffic cams, public infrastructure, gas stations, private homes, and farm properties stretching from Winona to the outer edge of Whitewater State Forest. The retrieval and review of over 7 hours of video data became a joint effort involving Winona Police, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and FBI technical analysts. Every frame was run through license plate recognition software, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with Adam's GPS records. The results were conclusive. Adam's route was anything but casual. Instead of a leisurely drive, he followed a looping, deliberate path, circling remote back roads multiple times. At certain points, he made unexplained U-turns and significantly slowed down in desolate areas, far from public landmarks or destinations. At one intersection on County Road 9, traffic cameras captured Adam pulling over for more than 6 minutes, engine running, with no apparent reason to stop. The area led to an unmarked dirt path not commonly used by hikers or hunters, confirmed by local forestry officials as an inaccessible and rarely visited zone. This same location had been identified in GPS logs as a low-speed pause with no reported stop in Adam's statements. Further footage from a nearby farm camera showed Adam's vehicle repeating a back-and-forth pattern, turning around twice in 15 minutes. Experts in criminal behavioral analysis noted that such repetition is consistent with location scouting or concealment behavior, typically seen in suspects attempting to select or revisit a hiding spot. Using advanced software, the team created a 3D visual heat map of Adam's entire route on March 31st. Key indicators like sudden speed drops, vehicle idle periods, and non-reported stops were marked in red. The pattern was undeniable. Nearly the entire route focused on wooded, remote areas. None of his stops matched his claimed visits to gas stations or family homes. Even more alarming, surveillance cameras in downtown Winona revealed an unreported second trip by Adam later that day. At 5:20 p.m., his vehicle was seen leaving the neighborhood again. However, instead of heading into the city, he turned toward the outskirts and returned approximately 40 minutes later, with no stops at stores, no passengers, and no visible activity. This trip had never been mentioned in any of his interviews. Investigators suspected this return visit might have been an attempt to revisit the site, potentially to check on hidden evidence or adjust a crime scene after feeling pressure from the ongoing investigation. Behavioral analysts concluded that Adam's travel route fit the classic profile of a suspect attempting to obscure or revise actions post-crime. The lack of destinations, repeated scanning of remote areas, and deviation from stated alibis pointed to a psychological state of control, loss, and improvisation under pressure. When the full route, including GPS, surveillance frames, and timestamps, was mapped and presented visually, the picture was clear. Adam was not aimlessly driving. He was executing a pattern. Based on these findings, the investigative unit formally reclassified the case as evidence of attempted post-incident concealment, marking a shift from suspicion to structured criminal analysis. The narrative of a man out for a drive was now exposed as a strategic, if flawed, effort to avoid detection. With over 3 hours of visual data, Adam's actions were now logged, verified, and preserved, not just in memory or assumption, but in digital trails, pixel by pixel. His alibi had collapsed, and in its place stood a route of deception, rendered in satellite maps and surveillance angles. As the investigation shifted toward digital forensics, a series of unexpected revelations from Adam's vehicle GPS data began to surface. While he had previously claimed to have driven aimlessly around the Winona area, the actual tracking data told a different story. A deliberate, repeated route circling the forested outskirts of the city, roughly 35 miles from home. Footage from traffic and neighborhood security cameras along these routes helped reconstruct his movements. At 11:50 a.m., Adam left home, then drove toward the Whitewater State Forest area, remaining in that zone for nearly an hour before returning to Winona. There was no evidence of him exiting the vehicle, meeting anyone, or having a clear purpose for the trip. In criminal behavioral analysis, unexplained, looped travel patterns often suggest attempts to dispose of evidence or locate isolated areas for concealment. The Whitewater Forest, known for its rugged terrain, rocky inclines, rivers, and thick woods, presented exactly the kind of location where traces could be hidden. That raised the inevitable question: what was Adam doing there for nearly an hour? The behavioral analysis team, alongside search and recovery units, began cross-referencing the GPS path with terrain data and environmental overlays. They divided the forest into sectors of varying suspicion levels, based on stopping times, vehicle speed changes, and path overlaps. From this, they built a detailed timeline capable of directly challenging Adam's version of events, and step-by-step began dismantling the narrative he was trying to protect. While GPS data from Adam's vehicle had already outlined a suspicious route, investigators knew they needed a second, independent source to confirm the accuracy of his movements. Their attention turned to surveillance footage from traffic cams, public infrastructure, gas stations, private homes, and farm properties stretching from Winona to the outer edge of Whitewater State Forest. The retrieval and review of over 7 hours of video data became a joint effort involving Winona Police, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and FBI technical analysts. Every frame was run through license plate recognition software, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with Adam's GPS records. The results were conclusive. Adam's route was anything but casual. Instead of a leisurely drive, he followed a looping, deliberate path, circling remote back roads multiple times. At certain points, he made unexplained U-turns and significantly slowed down in desolate areas, far from public landmarks or destinations. At one intersection on County Road 9, traffic cameras captured Adam pulling over for more than 6 minutes, engine running, with no apparent reason to stop. The area led to an unmarked dirt path not commonly used by hikers or hunters, confirmed by local forestry officials as an inaccessible and rarely visited zone. This same location had been identified in GPS logs as a low-speed pause with no reported stop in Adam's statements. Further footage from a nearby farm camera showed Adam's vehicle repeating a back-and-forth pattern, turning around twice in 15 minutes. Experts in criminal behavioral analysis noted that such repetition is consistent with location scouting or concealment behavior, typically seen in suspects attempting to select or revisit a hiding spot. Using advanced software, the team created a 3D visual heat map of Adam's entire route on March 31st. Key indicators like sudden speed drops, vehicle idle periods, and non-reported stops were marked in red. The pattern was undeniable. Nearly the entire route focused on wooded, remote areas. None of his stops matched his claimed visits to gas stations or family homes. Even more alarming, surveillance cameras in downtown Winona revealed an unreported second trip by Adam later that day. At 5:20 p.m., his vehicle was seen leaving the neighborhood again. However, instead of heading into the city, he turned toward the outskirts and returned approximately 40 minutes later, with no stops at stores, no passengers, and no visible activity. This trip had never been mentioned in any of his interviews. Investigators suspected this return visit might have been an attempt to revisit the site, potentially to check on hidden evidence or adjust a crime scene after feeling pressure from the ongoing investigation. Behavioral analysts concluded that Adam's travel route fit the classic profile of a suspect attempting to obscure or revise actions post-crime. The lack of destinations, repeated scanning of remote areas, and deviation from stated alibis pointed to a psychological state of control, loss, and improvisation under pressure. When the full route, including GPS, surveillance frames, and timestamps, was mapped and presented visually, the picture was clear. Adam was not aimlessly driving. He was executing a pattern. Based on these findings, the investigative unit formally reclassified the case as evidence of attempted post-incident concealment, marking a shift from suspicion to structured criminal analysis. The narrative of a man out for a drive was now exposed as a strategic, if flawed, effort to avoid detection. With over 3 hours of visual data, Adam's actions were now logged, verified, and preserved, not just in memory or assumption, but in digital trails, pixel by pixel. His alibi had collapsed, and in its place stood a route of deception, rendered in satellite maps and surveillance angles.
Similar times after like around 1:33. So I'm just wondering.
That's when I was home.
Right.
Yeah.
But you said just at 1:33 p.m. I'm back here and my car is. I'm back and my car is still here. Did you get a ride or something? That's 1:30. You said you were home at noon.
Like 2 hours prior.
Yeah, I told you that when I got back home after I left the van, I just sat on the couch and played on my laptop for a while. I didn't text you right away.
Well, you texted me 2 hours later.
I guess I'm kind of wondering why you're at 1:30 after you've been home for a while. Why you are wondering then if you got a ride or something. At least let me know if you'll be back for pickup.
In the entire case file surrounding Maddi Kingsbury's disappearance, no moment stands out more starkly than her final text message, sent at 8:15 a.m. on March 31st. It was a short, routine message to her sister, work-related, neutral, nothing alarming. But from that moment on, Maddi vanished from every digital trace of life. Her phone went silent, no outgoing or incoming calls, no messages, no location pings, no social media logins. Her email accounts, both personal and professional, showed no further activity. Everything, everywhere, stopped. This made 8:15 a.m. the definitive cutoff point, the last verifiable moment anyone could confirm Maddi was alive. After that, she simply disappeared from the grid. Investigators immediately reviewed her calendar and work schedule. Maddi had a scheduled video conference at 8:30 a.m. with her healthcare team, but she never joined the call. She didn't send an excuse. She didn't notify anyone. According to her colleagues, she was uncharacteristically absent and unreachable. At home, her laptop remained open on the desk. Her headphones were sitting next to it. Everything suggested Maddi had been fully prepared to start her day. And then something happened in the narrow window between 8:15 and 8:30. This led investigators to one stark realization. Maddi didn't disappear on the road, in public, or on a remote trip. She disappeared from inside the home she shared with Adam, in the middle of a weekday morning, during what should have been a predictable, structured routine. Adam was the only other adult present in the house at the time. Yet when questioned, he could not confirm having seen Maddi after they returned from dropping the kids off. He claimed not to remember what she was wearing, or whether she took her phone or wallet. These vague answers left a critical gap in the timeline, effectively creating a sealed-off block of time where only Adam could account for what happened and didn't. One of the most disturbing elements of the case was Maddi's phone. At exactly 8:16 a.m., all digital signals stopped. No passive app usage, no background data, no location tracking. In rare situations, phones can stop transmitting if powered off or destroyed. In Maddi's case, it was as if the device had been deliberately disabled in a manner designed to erase all trace, a step that requires intention and knowledge. But the most chilling aspect wasn't the absence of data. It was the manner of disappearance. Total silence. No struggle heard, no emergency signal, no activity. From one minute to the next, Maddi was simply gone. And from a criminal investigative standpoint, this type of abrupt disconnection only happens when an act of violence is fast, calculated, and fully executed in isolation. There were no cries for help, no chance for her to text or call. While the outside world believed Maddi was starting her workday, she may have already been harmed, or worse, and no one knew. The moment passed unnoticed. That's what makes 8:15 not just a timestamp, but a fracture point in the entire case. A single moment where all evidence branches outward. Every theory, every clue, every contradiction now revolves around the question: what happened to Maddi Kingsbury in her own home in the minutes following that final message? As the evidence mounted, GPS records, surveillance footage, and physical findings, investigators knew it was time to return to the source: Adam's testimony. But this time, it wasn't about general questions or polite interviews. It was about pressure, about finding where the cracks would show. The third round of questioning was conducted behind closed doors. Since Adam had not yet been formally charged, no attorney was present. But the shift in his behavior was undeniable. Compared to his earlier composure, Adam now appeared defensive, guarded, and vague. When pressed for specifics, his answers began to contradict earlier statements or drift into ambiguous, evasive language. One key inconsistency came when detectives revisited the timeline between 8:15 and 10:30 a.m., the final window in which Maddi was known to be alive. Previously, Adam claimed he believed Maddi was working upstairs. Now, when asked again, he replied, "Maybe she went out. I didn't really notice." That shift, from active to passive awareness, was more than semantic. It was a collapse in the narrative he'd maintained for days. Another red flag surfaced when investigators confronted him about his departure time. His initial statement said he left home around 10:30 a.m., but data from his vehicle GPS showed the car remained parked until almost 11:50. When shown this information, Adam hesitated, then muttered something about maybe the house clocks being off, or cleaning up the garage before leaving. To detectives, this wasn't just a small discrepancy. It was evidence that Adam was no longer in control of the story he'd built. Behavioral analysts flagged this as classic defensive disorientation, a state where a suspect, under cognitive stress, begins to blur the lines between memory and cover-up. The longer the questioning continued, the more Adam's explanations became disconnected and unstructured. Things unraveled further when he was asked about a stop near Whitewater Forest, a location backed by GPS and traffic camera footage. At first, Adam denied being there. But when shown the map and images, he stumbled. I don't remember. Maybe I got lost. It was no longer just evasion. It was breakdown. Most telling was his response when asked about the hoodie discovered in the trash, the one bearing Maddi's DNA. Rather than express shock or offer a theory, Adam simply said, "I don't know who put it there." It was a cold, detached reply to a highly specific and incriminating detail. By this point, Adam had lost control of the conversation. He was no longer guiding the narrative. He was reacting to evidence. Each question pulled him further into a web of contradictions. Each answer revealed a widening gap between what he claimed and what the investigation already knew. The interrogation concluded with over a dozen discrepancies noted in the official report, spanning digital timelines, physical movements, and previous statements. And while there was still no confession, the result was just as impactful. For investigators, this was the moment Adam crossed the threshold. No longer just a person of interest, he was now positioned as the central suspect in a disappearance that had every indication of foul play. He wasn't just failing to provide answers. He was running out of room to lie. Just days after Maddi's disappearance, her family transformed their grief into a public plea for justice. In front of a row of cameras, they didn't just speak, they called on the world to act. At a press conference, Maddi's father spoke with trembling conviction. "We just want to bring our daughter home. Whatever it takes, we won't stop." That statement resonated far beyond Winona. Within 48 hours, hundreds of volunteers arrived, locals, friends, co-workers, and complete strangers. They came with flashlights, maps, boots, and drones. The search was systematic and relentless. Forest trails, riverbanks, abandoned buildings, and fields were divided into grids. Communication groups were set up. Coordination centers were established. The effort was organized, determined, and real. Social media exploded. The hashtag Find Maddi went viral. People shared search updates, GPS heat maps, and drone footage. Local businesses printed thousands of flyers. Schools held candlelight vigils. Churches provided food and shelter to search teams. Even Maddi's former classmates, some who hadn't seen her in years, showed up ready to search. At the same time, digital volunteers were combing through old images, surveillance video, GPS data, and metadata on social media. Nothing was too small to be overlooked. Every inch of whitewater forest was scanned, reviewed, and walked. As the movement grew, so did public pressure. People demanded answers. Why hadn't anyone been arrested? Was someone protecting Adam? The Winona Police Department issued a rare public statement, acknowledging the unprecedented level of community involvement and reiterating that Maddi's case remained a top priority. But for Maddi's family, the search wasn't just about finding her. It was about showing her, wherever she might be, that no one was giving up. Despite the overwhelming scale of the search, Maddi remained missing. No body, no clothes, no phone. The dogs found nothing. The forest gave no clues. The river stayed silent. She had vanished, efficiently, intentionally. But the absence of physical evidence didn't mean the investigation had stalled. Authorities began to close in on Adam. With court-authorized warrants, his digital life was dissected. Phone records, browser history, and banking activity were monitored. A geofence warrant was activated, capturing all electronic movement within 10 miles of key areas. His car was impounded. His home was under passive 24/7 surveillance. Though not charged, Adam was now the center of a quiet but focused law enforcement campaign. Undercover cars tracked his movements. His phone was cloned. All messages, calls, and app activity were mirrored. Behavioral analysts studied his routine, watching for any break-in pattern, any panic, any slip. He began to isolate. Friends distanced themselves. Family stayed silent. He left his job, declined interviews, refused to speak publicly. The pressure wasn't just legal, it was psychological. Investigators were waiting for him to crack. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit launched a parallel review. They built a timeline of Adam's past relationships, controlling behaviors, emotional manipulation. Incidents once dismissed as minor now re-emerged under forensic light. Verbal abuse, jealousy, and passive threats, all added to the profile. The hope that even without a body, the weight of behavior, data, and circumstantial evidence might hold up in court. Several U.S. states had pursued convictions in no-body homicide cases before, but they were rare and risky. The district attorney's office convened grand jury discussions. Prosecutors reviewed GPS data, forensic reports, and expert testimony. They weighed their options: move forward with an indictment or continue surveillance until they had something irrefutable. In the meantime, forensic labs didn't stop. Soil samples, fiber traces, and chemical residue from Adam's home, vehicle, and the forest site were reanalyzed using newer methods. Maddi's cloud accounts were reconstructed, her digital history reassembled, piece by piece. And through it all, one fact remained: Adam was the last known person to see Maddi alive.
The Gabby Petito story.
This is
This case is rearing some eerily similar circumstances. Your timeline is off, and these text messages where you're kind of suddenly worried about her, they don't make sense, and they almost seem like they're intentional. They almost seem like they're breadcrumbs that you knew the police would pick up.
Okay.
And I'm trying to work with you here. Again,
I'm just saying now I'm not going to say much because now my wall is up and I'm probably going to have to get a lawyer. I'm feeling really accused and stuff. So,
Okay.
I mean, you can ask what you want and I'll answer. I'm just saying I'm putting up my defense now. I've been working with you guys completely, but now I'm getting accused of stuff, so
Well, what I can say to that is we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't
No,
try to
I get that too. I get that too. So
After hours of footage, interviews, and evidence, one question still haunts the case. What happened to Maddi Kingsbury? A young mother, a healthcare professional, a daughter, sister, and friend. She had no mental health issues, no history of running away, no debt, no reason to disappear. She wasn't taken from a highway or a nightclub. She vanished from her own home in broad daylight on a quiet morning. No broken windows, no forced entry, no unheard screams. Her phone went dark at 8:15 a.m. and it never came back online. Some speculated, a stalker, a mental break, a staged disappearance. But none of those theories explained the timeline gaps, the total digital silence, or the trail that led directly and only to Adam. And Adam? He remained silent. He offered no working timeline, no convincing explanation, refused a polygraph, never joined the search, never made a public plea. Silence became his strategy. But Maddi's family kept speaking. They organized campaigns, raised reward money, held rallies, made noise. Her children, now old enough to ask where their mother went, still had no answers. Investigators never gave up. The case stayed open. Every move Adam made, every inconsistency, every second of data documented and preserved. And those working the case still believed that someday, maybe by a new tool or one small mistake, the truth would break through. Because Maddi didn't simply vanish. Someone made her disappear. And no matter how hard that person tries to erase the truth, the evidence still remains, waiting to speak. Until it does, one question will never stop echoing. Where is Maddi?